Welcome to the town of Røros, which is located 150 kilometers to the south of Trondheim in southern Norway. This is a mining town. It was founded in 1644 after a German investor discovered that was copper here to be explored. So he founded the first mine here, and in very little time, in the 1600s, the town grew. Because there was nothing here at the time. The town grew and more people came in to find a job, and it grew prosperous due to the exploitation and mining of copper ore. It stood like that for more than 3 centuries. Nowadays it's a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It has been so since 1980, and it's actually the second coldest village in Norway. We are now standing at the intersection of what is arguably the 2 most important streets in Røros. This is the little street, which is probably people might think by mistake that this is the most important street in Røros because all the tourism takes place here. There's lots of cafes, restaurants, shops around here. But actually, the most important street in Røros is here, which is the street that leads to all the administration buildings that were connected to the mining company that actually ran the town when the mining was active. This is also called the Church Street, which leads to the main church of Røros. We are now standing at the building that was once the headquarters of the mining company. Nowadays it's a police station, but it still retains that symbol there. The 2 hammers with what most people would think that's the symbol for the female. But actually that's also the symbol for copper. That symbol is the logo for the mining company that once ran the economy of Røros. That symbol is very famous around here. It's the symbol of the Røros municipality. It's even present at the tower of the Røros church, which is pretty uncommon if you think about it, to have a logo of a company in the place of worship. It's not something you see every day. Most buildings are not the original buildings from the 17th century though. For the most part they were destroyed by fires, mainly caused by Swedish invasions at the late 1600s, because at the time Norway was part of Denmark and the arch enemy of Denmark was Sweden at the time, so there were lots of Swedish invasions and then the buildings were then rebuilt over and over, so most buildings that stand nowadays in Røros are not the original buildings. Currently around 3,700 people live in Røros. If someone wants to buy a house here, if you want to buy a house here, you actually have to live in it. You cannot just buy a house to use as a summer cottage because it's not allowed. The reason why these buildings cannot only be used for vacation is because it leads to the abandonment of the buildings and then the village would be empty, pretty much. These buildings are one of several reasons why Røros is visited by over 1 million people every year nowadays. We are now standing at the top of a mount of slag, which is waste that was produced after all the process of refining the copper ore to produce this waste. These houses were for the lower working class people of Røros. On the contrary, on the other side of the river, those houses were more for the upper class, people who were actually more wealthy, had more cattle. Usually they had like 10 cows at times, and all these people were self-sufficient because the closest town was Trondheim, which at the time would take 1 week by horse and carts to arrive there. So most people here produce their own food. And speaking of river, the river is actually the reason why the factory, copper factory, which is nowadays a museum, is here in the first place, because on the contrary to what most people think, the mines are actually not here. The closest copper mine is 12 kilometers away from Røros. But the factory is here because the river produced the energy that was required to make the factory work. And this is the only factory that is here nowadays, which again is a museum that you can visit. But at the time when the company was flourishing, there were around 12 factories around here, all of them producing copper and selling copper in the international market. The first church of Røros was finished in 1650, which was around 6 years after the mining company started exploring copper ore around here. But this church here was finished in 1784, and at the time it was the second largest church in Norway. Up to 1,600 people can fit inside, which would be the entire population of the town. It's a Protestant church, and it has the oldest organ in Norway, which is very rarely used nowadays. It has a new one inside as well, and it even has a seat for the king. Røros nowadays lives mostly on tourism. It's one of the 8 UNESCO World Heritage Sites in Norway. It's an important place to understand the legacy that the mining of copper left in Norway, and it's really worth checking out.